The chandeliers dripped with crystal light, casting a golden glow over the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. From my place in the shadows at the back of the grand ballroom, I watched my family at the head table. They were radiant. My mother, draped in diamonds, dabbed a tear from her eye as she looked at my sister, Annika. My father raised his champagne flute, his voice booming with pride through the microphone. "To my daughter, Annika," he declared, and the room erupted in applause. "The visionary CEO of Minaj Majesty, the fastest-growing cosmetics empire in the country." Annika, or Nicki, as they always called her, stood up and took a bow, a perfect, practiced smile on her face. She looked like a queen surveying her kingdom. They were all so proud, so completely absorbed in their perfect moment, a family portrait of success. They had no idea I was even in the room. To them, I was just Belcalis, or Cardi, the screw-up, the disappointment, the girl who ran away years ago with nothing to her name. They believed I was probably waitressing somewhere, barely scraping by, a ghost from a past they'd conveniently erased. They were toasting a future built on my tears, my sweat, and my silence, and I was about to foreclose on all of it. My father continued his speech, rambling on about Nicki's natural talent and unbeatable business savvy. He spoke of her creating the company from the ground up, a true American dream story. Every word was a lie, a carefully constructed fantasy weaved from my stolen ideas, my stolen life savings, and my broken heart. Tonight was the 5-year anniversary gala for the company, a celebration of their monumental success. But for me, it was something else entirely. It was a reckoning. I tapped the screen of the tablet in my hand, bringing up the presentation file. The master of ceremonies was walking toward the podium, ready to introduce the night's keynote speaker, the mysterious, unseen majority shareholder who had recently acquired the company in a hostile takeover, the one they all desperately wanted to impress. He cleared his throat and leaned into the mic. "And now it is my great honor to introduce the new owner of Minaj Majesty." You might be wondering why I would choose this moment, the biggest night of their lives, to tear it all down. Why not just walk away and live my own successful life in peace? Because they didn't just take my money or my ideas. They took my name, my worth, my very identity, and tried to bury me with it. They just didn't realize they were planting a seed. To understand how we got to this grand ballroom, you have to understand the roles we were assigned from birth. That pedestal they placed Nicki on wasn't built overnight. Its foundation was laid with the floorboards of my childhood bedroom. In our family, there were only 2 parts to play: the star and the shadow. Nicki was born for the spotlight. She was beautiful, graceful, and had a smile that could charm a snake. I was the other one, Belcalis, loud, clumsy, always asking too many questions. While Nicki practiced ballet, I was in my room taking apart old radios. While she was praised for a simple drawing, I was told my science experiments were messy and a waste of time. My accomplishments were inconvenient truths in the perfect story they were writing for her. I remember it with perfect clarity. The 8th grade science fair. I had spent 3 months creating a line of pH-activated lip balms that changed color based on your body's chemistry. I researched ingredients, ordered supplies with my allowance, and meticulously documented every failed batch in my notebook until I got the formula right. I was so proud. My parents barely glanced at my display. They were too busy fawning over Nicki's project, a lazy poster board with magazine cutouts of the solar system she'd glued on the night before. "Oh, Annika, it's just stunning," my mother gushed. "You have such an artistic eye." When the judges awarded my project, the first place blue ribbon and a $200 prize, my parents looked genuinely confused, as if there had been a clerical error. That night at home, the celebration was not for me. My father sat me down and told me it was probably a fluke, that the judges must have felt sorry for me. My mother said my project was unladylike, and suggested I try something more like Nicki next time. Then, she took my $200 prize money. "We'll put this away for safekeeping," she said, her voice smooth and reasonable. The next weekend, Nicki came home with a brand new designer dress for the school dance, a dress that cost exactly $200. When I cried, I was the one who was punished for being ungrateful and jealous. This became the blueprint for our lives. My hard work was an invisible currency used to fund her effortless existence. My success was an inconvenient statistic to be ignored, while her mediocrity was a masterpiece to be praised. They weren't just raising a golden child, they were actively forging a scapegoat to carry the weight of her pedestal. Years passed, but the roles remained the same. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through a community college chemistry program, driven by the one passion they could never ridicule out of me. While Nicki was the darling of the local social scene, financed by our parents, I was in a cramped lab after hours, perfecting what the world would later know as Minaj Majesty's signature foundations. This wasn't a hobby anymore. It was my life's work. By the time I was 21, I had a binder thick with patented formulas, a 100-page business plan, and a marketing strategy designed to disrupt the entire industry. I also had $15,000 in a savings account, money I had scraped together from years of greasy diner aprons and stocking shelves. It was everything I had. One night, in a moment of weakness I will forever regret, I decided to show them. I thought, naively, that if they saw the professional-grade plan, the sheer volume of my work, they would finally see me. I laid it all out on the dining room table, my heart pounding with that same stupid, childish hope from the science fair. My father flipped through it with a dismissive air. "It's a cute idea, Cardi, but you don't have the head for business." My mother suggested I give my formulas to Nicki, that maybe she could do something with them. Annika just yawned and said the name I'd chosen, Majesty Cosmetics, sounded boring. I left the table that night feeling hollowed out, the familiar sting of invisibility burning behind my eyes. 2 weeks later, I went to the bank to withdraw a small amount for my rent. The account was empty. All $15,000 was gone. When I got home, panicking, I found a letter on the kitchen counter from the state's business bureau. It was addressed to Nicki Minaj, confirming the registration of her new sole proprietorship, Minaj Majesty. When I confronted them, holding the letter with trembling hands, they didn't even have the decency to lie. "Annika has the look, the charm," my mother said calmly, as if explaining why the sky is blue. "You're the brains, Belcalis. We know that. But she is the face. This is what's best for the family." My father added the final nail in my coffin. "You should be grateful," he said, his voice hard. "You'll get to be a part of your sister's success." They hadn't just stolen my money and my dream. They were trying to steal my reality, telling me I should thank them for the privilege of being erased. That night, I packed one small bag and walked out the front door without saying goodbye. The first few months were a special kind of hell. I slept in the back of my beat-up 2004 Honda Civic until I saved enough from a dishwashing job to afford a room in a house with 5 other people. Every single dollar was a battle. I lived on instant noodles and free coffee refills, and the hunger in my stomach was nothing compared to the gnawing emptiness inside me. I was a ghost. My family had erased me so completely that I started to wonder if I had ever existed at all. They were right, I thought in my darkest moments. I was nothing without them. I was just the messy, loud, inconvenient girl they'd always said I was. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I was on a city bus, exhausted after a 14-hour double shift, when I looked up and saw her. Annika. Her face was 10 feet tall, plastered on a billboard, smiling serenely over a bottle of my signature foundation. The slogan read, "Minaj Majesty, build your own empire." The irony was so staggering, so profoundly cruel, that something inside me snapped. The grief and the hurt that had been weighing me down for months didn't disappear, but they crystallized. They hardened from a suffocating fog into a diamond-sharp point. They were building their empire on my ruins. Fine, I would build my own on a foundation of their lies. From that day on, I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing for war. I kept my 2 jobs, but my real work started when my shifts ended. The public library became my home. I wasn't just a chemist anymore. I devoured books on corporate finance, contract law, stock trading, and hostile takeovers. My father's voice echoed in my head. You don't have the head for business. And I used it as fuel. I learned the language of their world better than they ever would. I opened a brokerage account with the first $500 I managed to save. I started small, using my analytical skills to invest in undervalued biotech companies, a field I understood. My first successful trade turned that $500 into $2,000. It wasn't much, but it felt like everything. It was the first dollar I had ever made that wasn't touched by their shadow, that wasn't tainted by their judgment. It was clean. It was mine. And I was just getting started. That first $2,000 was the seed. Over the next 5 years, I watered it with sleepless nights, 18-hour work days, and an obsessive, single-minded focus that bordered on madness. I lived in a small, bare apartment, drove the same old Honda, and wore clothes from discount stores, even as my portfolio grew from thousands to hundreds of thousands, and then into the millions. I moved from trading stocks to venture capital, founding my own anonymous investment firm, BA Capital. In the financial world, BA Capital became known as a ghost, a silent, ruthlessly effective entity that acquired promising tech and biotech startups. No one knew the name, face, or gender of the person in charge. I was a phantom, and my invisibility was my greatest asset. Meanwhile, my family's visibility was exploding. Minaj Majesty became a global phenomenon. I'd see Nicki's face everywhere, on talk shows, on the cover of Forbes, hailed as a self-made prodigy. I once watched an interview where my mother, dripping in jewels, told a story about how Nicki used to spend hours in her room as a child, mixing up the most wonderful lotions and potions. She smiled for the camera, a picture of maternal pride. We always knew she had a gift for chemistry. I felt a cold, calm certainty settle over me as I watched them lie. The wild, hot anger of my youth was gone, replaced by the patient, calculating focus of a predator. They weren't just my family anymore. They were a business liability, an equation to be solved. For all their public success, I knew their fatal flaw. They were arrogant. My father, who always fancied himself a brilliant businessman, had encouraged Nicki to expand aggressively. They took out massive, high-interest loans to build new factories and launch extravagant marketing campaigns using the company's inflated stock price as collateral. They were building a beautiful, shining castle on a foundation of sand. From my desk, I had a clearer view of their finances than they did. I saw every vulnerability, every misstep, every dollar of debt they accumulated. And I saw my opening. The time for accumulating power was over. It was time to begin positioning my pieces on the board. So, through a series of shell corporations, BA Capital began to quietly buy their debt. Every loan payment they made, every dollar of interest they paid to the bank, was funneled directly into my accounts. Every month, they were unknowingly funding the very weapon that would bring them down. Debt is a leash. And for the next year, I held theirs, letting them run just far enough to feel free before I would give it a subtle tug. The first tug was on their supply chain. Through a subsidiary of BA Capital, I acquired the small, specialized chemical plant that produced the base for their #1 selling product. Then, I engineered a logistical crisis, cutting their supply by 60%. Panic erupted within Minaj Majesty. Their production lines stalled, and their stock began to dip for the first time in their history. My father, in his infinite arrogance, saw it as a temporary problem, a bump in the road for their glorious empire. He and Nicki were too busy being famous to manage the tedious details of their own company. As they scrambled for a solution, another one of my shell corporations swooped in with a lifeline, an offer they couldn't refuse. BA Capital proposed to acquire a 51% controlling stake in Minaj Majesty. The deal was structured to look like a partnership, an unbelievably generous cash infusion that would solve all their debt problems and fund the global expansion they dreamed of. My lawyers told me my father was insufferable during the negotiations, lecturing them on his business philosophy, while Nicki was already making plans for a new Beverly Hills mansion. They were so blinded by ego and greed that they barely skimmed the fine print. They saw a mysterious, silent partner who wanted to give them hundreds of millions of dollars and let them keep their titles as CEO and president. They saw a winning lottery ticket. I saw a contract of surrender. There was one clause I insisted on personally, a non-negotiable term delivered through my attorneys. The acquisition would be announced at their upcoming 5-year anniversary gala. BA Capital's owner, who wished to remain anonymous until the event, would be the keynote speaker. They agreed instantly, giddy at the thought of such a dramatic and public display of their success. They wanted the world to watch as they ascended to a new level of wealth and power, and I was more than happy to give them the audience they craved. In the weeks leading up to the party, the business news channels were buzzing, calling it the deal of the year. I watched my father and Nicki on TV, preening for the cameras, talking about their brilliant future and their powerful new partner. They were planning a party to celebrate their victory. They had no idea they were sending out invitations to their own public execution. The trap was set. All I had to do was walk into the ballroom and spring it. And so, we're back where we started, in the grand ballroom with the chandeliers dripping light onto a scene of blissful ignorance. The master of ceremonies finished his introduction, his voice echoing slightly. The mysterious new owner of Minaj Majesty. A spotlight flared to life, sweeping the stage, but I wasn't on the stage. I was in the back of the room. I took a step forward, and then another, my heels clicking deliberately on the polished marble floor. A few heads turned, then a few more. A ripple of confusion spread through the room as I walked down the center aisle. The spotlight operator, seeing the commotion, swung the beam toward me, catching me in a circle of brilliant white. The entire room was silent now, watching. I didn't look at them. I looked only at the head table, at the 3 people frozen in a tableau of dawning horror. My mother's wineglass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. My father's face went from confused to a deep, blotchy red. And Nicki, her perfect, practiced smile collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. I reached the stage, climbed the steps, and took the microphone from the stunned MC. I looked out at the sea of faces, then let my gaze settle back on my family. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the silent hall. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Belcalis Almanzar, and I am the founder and principal of BA Capital." A collective gasp went through the room. A slide clicked on the giant screen behind me, a scanned page from my old chemistry notebook, showing my original pH-activated formula, dated 10 years ago. "I'd like to correct the record on the history of this company," I continued, my voice betraying no emotion. 5 years ago, Minaj Majesty was founded using my proprietary formulas, my comprehensive business plan, and my life savings of $15,000. It was not created by Nicki Minaj. It was stolen by her with the help of our parents. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. Therefore, as the new majority shareholder, my first official act is a restructuring of the leadership team. Effective immediately, the positions of CEO, held by Nicki Minaj, and President, held by my father, are terminated due to fraudulent representation and intellectual property theft dating back to the company's inception. Nicki let out a strangled cry. My father lunged to his feet, bellowing my name, but two discreet security guards I had placed nearby stepped forward and blocked his path. I looked past them, directly at the wreckage of my family. For 20 years, they told a story about a golden child destined for success and a screw-up destined for failure, I said, my voice dropping slightly. They were half right. They just bet on the wrong daughter. I placed the microphone back on the podium and walked off the stage without a second glance, the sound of reporters shouting and cameras flashing exploding behind me. The fallout was exactly as I had planned, immediate, public, and total. The story of the hostile takeover fueled by a family's betrayal was irresistible. It was on every news channel, every blog, every podcast. My family's name became synonymous with fraud. Their powerful friends disappeared overnight. The country club memberships were revoked. The invitations stopped coming. They were social pariahs, ruined not by my actions, but by the public revelation of their own. They tried to sue, of course. They countersued for defamation and emotional distress. But my evidence was irrefutable. The dated notebooks, the bank records showing the withdrawal of my $15,000 and their initial business deposits just days later. It was a short, humiliating legal battle that left them bankrupt. I didn't waste time watching them burn. I had a company to rebuild. The first thing I did was strip the name Minaj from every bottle, every box, and every advertisement. The company was reborn under its rightful name, Majesty Cosmetics. I installed a new board and a new executive team, people hired for their talent and integrity, not their name. We launched the Majesty Foundation, a multi-million-dollar fund dedicated to providing seed money for young female entrepreneurs who have the ideas but lack the family connections or financial support. I would be the person for them that I never had for myself. About a month after the gala, my mother called me. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to close the final door. Her voice was a broken, weeping mess. "How could you do this?" she sobbed. "You destroyed your own family. We have nothing." I listened without interruption, feeling a strange, hollow calm. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. There was nothing left. "You didn't lose a family, Mom," I said, my voice even and steady. "You lost a scapegoat. There's a difference." I hung up the phone before she could reply, and I never heard from them again. My revenge was never about watching them suffer. It was about creating a world where their opinion of me was irrelevant. It was about reclaiming the truth. Today, when I walk into my office, the name on the glass door doesn't say CEO. It says Belcalis Almanzar, founder. My work is my own. My success is my own. My name is my own. I was the girl they tried to erase, the shadow they cast aside to make their golden child shine brighter. But a shadow is only proof that there is a light shining somewhere. And I finally learned how to step out of the darkness and shine for myself.